Welcome back once again. Of course, embarking over the mutual relations between France and Egypt and the bilateral relations over years that have progressed in the course of many fields, the cultural partnership, investment partnership, economic partnership, also transportation modernization, renewable energy, you name it, entertainment, and have reached a climax in 2026 that copes with the time, also with the momentum. And why this, we're talking about that because Egypt and France, they possess a common foreign policy vision, a common strategic vision, a common cultural vision and historic background on many spheres. And on that particular topic, we're very delighted to be having with us here in the studio Dr. Mohamed Hashim, Professor of Mass Communication and International Media Expert. Good morning, Dr. Hashim.
Good morning, and thanks for having me on.
It's a great pleasure to have you on the Breakfast Show. And but before we get into more details, let's go over to that report and we'll come back to you.
The Egyptian-French cultural ties are deeply rooted, spanning over 2 centuries of cooperation, primarily driven by a shared enduring fascination with the ancient Egyptian civilization. Those relations are defined by strong archaeological partnerships, with nearly 50 French missions actively working in Egypt, alongside robust educational, linguistic and diplomatic exchange programs. Key aspects of cultural cooperation are archaeology and heritage. France is a leading partner in Egyptian archaeology. The partnership spans from the deciphering of the Rosetta Stone to contemporary restoration projects. The French language also holds a strong position in Egypt.
Welcome back once again. Very delighted to be having with us here in the studio Dr. Mohamed Hashim, like I earlier said, and he's a professor of Mass Comm and International Media Expert. Good morning, Dr. Hashim.
Yes, good morning, and thanks for having me on your morning show.
It's a real pleasure to have you, and embarking over one of the most successful diplomacies that probably countries have witnessed is Egypt and France. And the best example that we could probably recall now is an earlier visit. It was likely last year or even before last year,
yes,
when President Emmanuel Macron came to Egypt, and he was warmly greeted by people in Midtown Cairo and downtown Cairo, yes, and he was visiting the alleys and they sat on the cafe. People greeted him, they took photos with him. That is how the relation was being described to the whole world, and the image, yes, that was sent. Well, Egypt, of course, as a leading role in the region, possess similar relationships with other countries, European, yes, countries. But embarking on the French diplomatic relations with Egypt and the cultural ones also, we could say a lot. Where would you like to start?
Yes. Well, let's begin with the prior trip of Emmanuel Macron last time he came to Egypt, the president of France. It was a very down-to-earth visit. So he went to Old Cairo, he went to Al Hussein Mosque, walking around, of course, with the Egyptian president Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Obviously, the relationship was friendly, it was very close, it was full of bonding, and it was also relatable to the common Egyptian, which is very, very important, and that was a quite important visit. This time around, it's an inauguration of Senghor University in Burj Al Arab in Alexandria, which is also a big event. Now, we can say, is that the first university to be inaugurated from a French institution? And the answer would be no, because since 1798, since Napoleon came to the shores of Egypt, there's been nearly 200 years, so it's 2 centuries of cooperation between Egypt and France. Until this day, there are French schools. There's a French university which opened in 2002, so a lot of cooperation between education, culture, archaeology. There's obviously the fascination by the French of the ancient Egyptian civilization, and that's built onto the museum work, the Rosetta Stone. We can also talk about the French Institute des Français. The first one opened in 1967 in Heliopolis, and then another one in 1977 in Alexandria, and then 1996 in Munira in Cairo. So these are all staples of importance between the two nations. And there's a scientist, political scientist called Joseph Nye, NYE, who wrote a book called Soft Power. He mentions the importance of cultural, educational cooperations. They prove to be very important points of power between nations, and they educate the two nations of one another, and then they increase more and more cooperation and understanding of each other.
Right. You embarked on a very important foundation, which is culture as probably take-off for any progress of diplomacy or development of cultural leaps between countries. And when we talk about culture, we could consider it as a tool, one of the very successful tools of soft power among nations. Yes. So how is that really reflected in the case of Egypt and France? You talked about Napoleon, and you talked about the cultural centers, and you talked about how people at that particular time of Napoleon and ever since, the French language became almost like, between Egyptians, it's like a second language. There are certain, and even the Arabic language, the French people are the favorite guests for cultural tourism. When we talk about cultural tourism, it's the British and the French tourists who like to, but sometimes Japanese. So talking about culture as a foundation, and how the French people are very fond of the Egyptian history and the transcriptions over in that is very magical for them.
Yes, we could probably talk about something in media called gratification theory, which basically means that the things that are happening on the ground, so the cultural events, the cultural cooperation between the two nations, is getting seen and accepted by both nations. So the amazing pharaoh, the mummy parade that happened 5 years ago now in Egypt was definitely watched by France. Maybe not by other countries. I mean, the world saw it, but especially France is very interested as an audience. The layman in France is very interested in ancient Egyptian history. Whenever Egypt does something on the grounds of ancient Egyptian history, the French love to watch it, the people, not just the officials or not just the people that work in culture and education. So that's called gratification theory. And vice versa of Egypt. Till this day, there are French schools. Parents want to send their children in Egypt to French schools. They want them to speak French, and also that there's a love for French music. So a lot of Egyptian singers sing in French, and they sing in French at a very high level that you might think they're native speakers. There's a lot of singers in Egypt like Ehab Shawi, Ahmed Harfouch, all these people that till this day sing in French, and they emulate the lifestyle of the French to the Egyptians, and vice versa. The French love hearing about ancient Egypt, the mummies, the pharaohs. A lot of information about ancient Egypt is very important for the French people.
Right. When we also talk about France's part, the French people, of course, they like to read a lot. And Egypt have a great history when it comes to fiction, when it comes to great writers, just like Mexico, for example. So when it comes to the most very popular knowledge or novels or sources of knowledge, the Islamic and Arab sources of knowledge before in that era, and also again after that the Egyptian very famous writers like Naguib Mahfouz and all that. probably some French researchers also have delved into this and have interest on those spheres.
Yes, we also have the old actor called Gamir Ratib, who was
of course, and Youssef Chahine, the director.
Youssef Chahine, of course, the director who won the award in Cannes Film Festival, and his films were very motivated and inspired by the French culture. He looked up to Italian directors like Bertolucci and Fellini, but also he loved speaking in French. He was a native French speaker, and so is his niece till this day, Marianne Khoury, who runs Zawiya Cinema, and she has won her own awards also at the Cairo International Film Festival. So the culture continues on, the obsession with France, the liking of France, and vice versa. The French also have an obsession for Egypt and the liking of Egypt. So the collaboration between both nations is strong. It continues with universities, education partnerships, archaeology, theater, film, music.
Let's not forget also those film festivals that the popular international director Youssef Chahine, his movies have grabbed some awards actually with his team. That was very rewarding also.
Yes, I remember watching Youssef Chahine when the director Youssef Chahine when I was in my teenage years, and I loved his elaboration of his films in French. He used to always speak in French. He used to always hold the cigarette and speak in French. And when I studied the media,
the Parisian style.
The first thing I wanted to do was study French poetry, or I wasn't very good at French, but we have this love for the French language and the French culture. And the visit, obviously, of the French president really, stipulates and makes sure that we are.
It was very precious for the Egyptians, that visit.
The older visit.
Right, of course. But then talking also about how the culture is somehow, though that it is totally, that is European, and this is typical different Arab culture, but then they share the same principles, the wisdom of peace, the wisdom of philosophy, the wisdom of respecting humanity, and respecting the rights of nations to determine its own fate and its own decisions and all that. That is very much amplified on President Emmanuel Macron.
Yes, well, that's what.
And of course, not mentioning President Sisi, of course.
So President Emmanuel Macron's last visit, he made sure that he spoke about Egypt in a great vision. That Egypt
from the bottom of his heart. It was very, very natural.
And it's very true, because Egypt is the cornerstone of stability and safety and security. And for the French president to say that the rest of the world has to listen. It's not just some other, neighboring king or prince saying that. It's actually the president of France, and that is true, because Egypt does play a major role, as we all can see, in keeping the region very secure, very safe. Continuous negotiations, continuous peace talks, and France accepts that and provides a lot of work together. The infrastructure, the investments between both nations, not just the soft power in terms of culture and education, but that is the beginning of how countries should get to know one another. They should get to know one another with the fun stuff, the luxurious stuff like culture and art, and after that it takes off. We're hoping that the same thing can happen with Australia and Egypt. They can get to know one another through culture, film and theatre. That's a lot of the work that I've been doing. And hopefully one day, maybe in 100 years, we can get to the same cooperation between France and Egypt.
But then there is the very famous science of cross-culture communication. That is science in negotiating, in political negotiating, and in peaceful agreements, and in asserting peace and security and national security amongst countries. And that it's also in foreign policy. France and Egypt, they possess the language of cross-culture communication, and that probably is lacking, or probably that what causes tension between other countries.
When two people get married, the first thing they say, does he look like me, does she look like me? So what it's trying to say, it's about the importance of culture to be understood, and societal norms to be understood. social networks to be understood. For collaboration to happen, you need to understand people's culture. When you go to Japan and somebody
very
gives
important to study the culture before you.
Yes.
Right?
The culture of honor, shame, respect, all these things need to be understood by when Western societies come to work in the Middle East or Egypt especially. And even if you go to Japan, when a Japanese businessman hands you his business card, you need to hold it in a certain way with two hands and show importance to the business card, or else you lose the business deal. So there's little things that culture and education provide that gives that step forward to further negotiations and further collaboration. Same thing when two people get married. They need to understand one's culture. You know, some people when they enter your home, they need to take their shoes off. Other cultures say don't take the shoes off. So a little bit of disrespect or a little bit of misunderstanding could ruin the collaboration between nations and people. But obviously Egypt and France have kept that mutual respect and stability and friendship, close friendship.
Because of the awareness.
Yes.
The reason we're saying that is that culture and politics are indispensable, and they are part and parcel of each other.
Yes.
You cannot detach them from each other. And probably why negotiations are failing at times of crisis, failing one round after the other, is because there is failing language of the cross-cultural communication.
Yes.
They are lacking it. They cannot exercise it with each other. And that's why you need a third party like Egypt. When Egypt played that role and is still playing it actually between countries and have succeeded in effecting peace agreements.
Yes. And will continue to do so. Egypt has always been seen as the most diplomatic country in the region, the most cultured country in the region, the most educated country in the region. Every time you go overseas and you tell someone I'm Egyptian, they say, oh, you speak 7 languages. Because they know Egypt loves culture, it loves language, it loves music, it loves culture, and also the Suez Canal. So the Suez Canal means that all trade from Europe to India comes through Egypt. So Egyptians are used to seeing foreigners, they're used to seeing different people, they're used to being very diplomatic with each other. And I think Egyptians in general, the average Egyptian, has a diplomatic protocol about him or her, just by nature, even if
of
they
course,
haven't been.
The layman in the streets, you find them, they're very friendly.
Exactly.
Just like in Rome, when you we're similar with Italians also.
Yes.
Not mentioning France, and also Italians also, they have the same particular background.
Yes.
And do you agree with me, or not with me, but do you agree with the principle of expanding the horizon of this culture, or of this principle, like the cross-cultural communication, and progressing with it, with policies with other nations? And this is what exactly Egypt and France is doing, and Egypt with other countries, and Spain also, Egypt and Italy.
It no longer becomes a diplomatic protocol. It becomes a communication theory. In media we call it the communication theory, where the use of artists, educators, intellectuals are used to make that sphere of cooperation and collaboration more fruitful. And then you bring in the businessmen, the investors. They come in after all the cultural and the education has been addressed and facilitated over many years. So I mean, I'm lucky to be here. I'm glad to be invited today to be speaking about the old visit of Emmanuel Macron, the President of France, and also the continuous collaboration between France and Egypt, because it is the most prominent and the most...
Exactly, and we're proud of it. We're very proud of it. Yes. Do you think that such a principle or such a policy we can give credit a great deal to leaders of countries? I mean, the way they think, their vision, like President Emmanuel Macron, and of course President Abdel Fattah Sisi is very popular with his soft diplomacy and foreign policy, very successful, and we have seen it in some rounds with countries, even very aggressive countries. He has tamed their nation into that particular mood of the cross-cultural communication, very successful.
I think President Abdel Fattah Sisi has done something very unique over the last 13 years. He's brought back the ancient Egyptian style of diplomacy, of peace, from the ancient Egyptian times. He's really brought that spirit back, that peaceful, calm, diplomatic spirit back to Egypt.
And from the heart, I mean, with credibility.
Yes. And he's been credited by the UN and credited by the US and all of Europe, basically. He had a standing applause, standing ovation a couple of months ago after the Gaza peace that was organized in Egypt. And it goes on and on and on. And he's continuously invited to the UAE and other countries where he's recognized for a real peacemaker in the region and a strong leader who can also implement peace. And the example of France and Egypt is a fantastic example of continuous cooperation between both nations.
And especially at this timing, when European countries and the European Union and all those entities are considering to reshape their alliances once again at this very crucial time. Not talking about politics, but then they are looking for different partnerships that have foresight, that have vision, wider horizons, that could understand the culture and future of other nations and consider it with seriousness and all this. That is not selfish. And this, do you think this is could be reflected on Egypt?
Yes, I was going to say it's a great reflection of Egypt, because Egypt has everything. When I first came to Egypt, somebody gave me a funny example of Egypt's like the magician's hat, and you put your hand in, one time it's a rabbit, one time it's something else. It has it all. It has French schools, French universities, Chinese universities, EU universities, British, Canadian. So whatever you want, you'll find it in Egypt. And there's a lot of old Arabic sayings that say, if you're looking for something, you'll find it in Egypt. And I think Egyptians know that about Egypt, but the Westerners and the Europeans now are finding out that whatever you do want in Egypt, especially if it's stability and safety, it is probably one of the most safest countries in the world. And this is said by a lot of tourists, by the way. A lot of people that come to Egypt, stay in Egypt, expats, they always say it's the most safest country in the world. And it's always good to let everyone know that. There's a lady actually that cycles around Egypt on a motorbike. She travels on a bike all around. She's from America, and she's saying it's the most safest country in the world, more than America, more than all those countries.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Of course. But then we're very happy to hear that, and hopefully Egypt could witness more good reviews and could be understood in the way real Egypt is. At this particular point, we'd like to thank you so much, Dr. Mohamed Hashim, Professor of Mass Comm and International Media Expert. Thank you very much for coming over.
Thank you for having me again.
Great pleasure.
Great talk today about France and Egypt. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye. A pleasure. And by this, we come to the end of this edition of the Breakfast Show. Many thanks to all of you. Till we see you again tomorrow morning. That's a goodbye.
The new capital, a vision for Egypt's future.